Ooh, still have some more people coming in. Okay. While I'm doing that, Victor, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
All right, everybody. So, hello, friends, and welcome. I'm Denise Lee, a volunteer for CHSA, and some of you may know me as a volunteer for the Temple of Quantai in Mendocino, California. This partnership with CHSA is to bring this discussion from the Washington Township Museum of Local History about the Chinese History Project, Forgotten East Bay Tracts, to share with you this evening. As you are listening to me with some introductory information, please type in the chat your name, where you're located, and if you're with any of our AAPI organizations. Like I'm also with CAHN, the Chinese American Heritage Network. Okay, for Zoom housekeeping, so you know this presentation is going to be recorded. We'll be presenting for about 1 hour, then head into a Q&A session. If you have questions, please put them in the chat as I'll be monitoring them. Since this is being recorded, I will be muting all participants. I'll try to repeat as people are being let in, as you've heard. And then now I'm also going to check on why the group chat has been disabled. But while I do that, and before we get started, let me show you who we are also working with here. All right. This is a presentation slide that was done by Janet Barton, a historian with the township. At the end of this presentation, I'll be sharing the website of the Washington Township Museum of Local History, so you can get further information. I'll put a link of the website in the chat, but I know I have to work on the group chat. This is where you'll find the recording of tonight's presentation. Now, let me introduce you to Victor Wong, tonight's presenter. Victor, like some of you attending tonight, was born and raised in San Francisco, Chinatown by parents from the Pearl River Delta in Guangdong Province. He's a researcher with the township's Chinese History Project. He has a passion for researching and telling stories about the Chinese builders of iron roads, especially in building the first transcontinental railroad through Niles Canyon, right here in our backyard. Now, with no further delay, Victor, please take it away and enjoy all.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. And thank you all for coming. And welcome to this Zoom presentation on, excuse me, I need to share the screen again. Sorry about that. I thought I had it set up. Here we go. Forgotten East Bay Tracks, honoring Chinese builders of the final leg of the Pacific Railroad. What I have up there is one of these stereographs that were in the rage in the 1860s. So if you can make sure you can see the whole stereograph, that would enable you to see all the slides that I'll be presenting. And so we'll start off with a brief 9-second video clip.
This is Jeopardy!
A Niles California marker says it's the site where this was truly completed, some months after a ceremony in Promontory, Utah. This clue appeared in Jeopardy on January 18th, 2021. Many early Chinese immigrants to North America came from the 4 counties in the delta of this precious southern Chinese river. This clue appeared in Double Jeopardy September 10th, 2025. What I like to do today is to unpack these 2 clues, and to unpack them, I need to divide the talk into two parts. In part 1, we'll ask the question, who were the Chinese builders of iron roads? And in so doing, we'll be able to address the Double Jeopardy clue. In part 2, how did they build the final leg of the Pacific Railroad? And we'll take a deep dive into Alameda Canyon and then unpack the Niles marker with and surprising twist at the end. But first, part one. Who were the Chinese builders of iron roads? We'll begin the story in San Francisco in January of 1855. After the gold rush and before any railroad was completed in California, in the first issue of the bilingual news, The Oriental, the following fantastically bold forecast was made. Quote, the boundless plateau of the western half of this continent will be scattered by busy lines of Chinese builders of iron roads that shall link the two oceans and add to the wealth and comforts of the dwellers upon either shores, unquote. William Spear. Who was William Spear? He was a pioneer Presbyterian pastor in San Francisco, Chinatown. He was fluent in Cantonese. He defended the Chinese, and now he's considered to be the champion of the Chinese in California. But how did he know? Well, it turns out that years past, he spent some time with the Chinese in the Pearl River Delta in Guangdong province. And Guangdong, as you can see, is right there in red on this little map of China. And I'm going to blow that up. And you will see that this is Hong Kong right here, Canton or Guangzhou right here, and Macau. And these four counties here in red are the four counties that the double jeopardy clue was all about. And that's the say, yep. And in addition to those four counties, the fifth county here, Zhongshan, and also three more counties here, right, very close to Canton, Samyup. Those are the 8 counties in which the vast majority of immigrants from China came in the 19th century and into the first half of the 20th century. So we're going to follow one of these who made the trip from these 4 counties, one of these 4 counties, to the United States. And before that, let me just give you some characteristics of these people. The Chinese builders were Pearl River Delta villagers. They were deeply rooted in the villages. For generations, they would live and die in the villages. They spoke village variant of Cantonese, some mutually unintelligible, especially in this county number 5 in Zhongshan. They were hard workers who persevere. They were committed to the family left behind. That's where they sent the money back to. And they seeded just about all the 19th century Chinatowns in the world. So here's one person who made that journey. His name is Lin Hong. And when he was 12 years old, he was sent to Gamsan, which is Cantonese for California, literally meaning Gold Mountain. And at age 21, he was hired by Central Pacific as a foreman. And he worked on the railroads until he settled in San Francisco in the Pochero district. So this will be a short 2-minute video.
I was 12 years old when I jumped on a junk headed to Gamsan, Gold Mountain. The family was struggling, and since I'm the oldest, I left my village to find work so that I could send money home. It took 6 months to get there. My legs were like jelly when we landed. I wasn't on land long. The only work I found was on ships as a cabin boy. I did the chores and helped the cooks.
Then he grew up.
After a few years, I struck out to explore California. I built stone fences, dug canals, and tried mining gold, but I didn't strike it rich. In 1864, Central Pacific Railroad was recruiting workers to lay railroad tracks to connect the West Coast to the East Coast. I'd grown to 6 feet, tall for a Chinese man, and I spoke English. I was hired right away and made foreman of a crew and go-between with the white bosses. Chinese workers got the most dangerous jobs, especially when the railroad reached the high Sierras. Big chunks of granite mountains had to be blasted to bits or carved out for tunnels before tracks could be laid. My men bore holes for dynamite placed on top and all around the mountain. Once the fuses were lit, the men had to scramble out of the way. Thousands of men were injured or killed from accidents. The cross-country railroad project was completed in 1869 with celebrations from coast to coast. But Chinese workers do not appear in any photos. Our large contributions and sacrifices never mentioned. I settled in San Francisco's Potrero district after my railroad days. I sold meat products with my wife and 7 children. In 2019, 150 years after the completion of the railroad, Chinese workers finally received the recognition we were due. My great-granddaughters were there to honor me. Lim Lip Hong.
Now for the rest of the story after the completion of Promontory. How did they build the final leg of the Pacific Railroad? And we do the deep dive into the Alameda Canyon. Alameda Canyon was the name given then, and then it became Niles Canyon, and we'll unpack the Niles marker with the twist at the end. Now, the story is complex, so I'll divide it into 4 more parts, subparts. First, the prelude, then Act 1. They're going to be in the canyon, and then the interlude in between the time in the canyon and Act 2 when they return to the canyon. So it wasn't a straight shot. It was a complicated situation. First, the prelude. You need to understand something about the Pacific Railroad. Abe Lincoln, who was known as Honest Abe when he was a railroad lawyer, is seen here looking at routes for the Pacific Railroad. When he became president, he signed the Pacific Railroad Act. And it provided federal aid to construct the Pacific Railroad from the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean. So that's the definition we're going to use for the Pacific Railroad, from the Missouri to the Pacific. And it provided it to three companies, initially only 2, but when it was amended in March 1865, excuse me, the third one was added. Central Pacific is the second one, from Sacramento to Utah. And the third one, Western Pacific, from Sacramento to San Jose, and then San Jose to San Francisco. Ironically, Central Pacific had this third part, but they reassigned it, and Western Pacific then received it. Federal aid is available after completion of the first 20 miles of railroad. That's important to remember. And from that, they would get bonds and land grants. So with that, we can look at the railroad from San Francisco. As most of you might know, there's this railroad. San Francisco was a small town then, maybe less than 100,000. 1861, they jumpstart with some local county funds from San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties. And they were one of the first railroads to hire Chinese, and was completed in 1864. Now, most of this is part of Caltrain. Now, on the same day in 1864, Western Pacific then announced its route from San Jose to Sacramento. and also the general contractor that they hire without even going out for a bid. So this was an inside job and was rigged, so to speak, to be San Francisco's main line to the east. So the line went from San Jose up through Alameda Canyon, then to Stockton and up to Sacramento. And we'll take the deep dive now into the canyon. So this is Act 1, Alameda Canyon, Western Pacific as San Francisco's main line. So here's another one of those stereograms that I was mentioning to you. So Jerome Cox was the subcontractor who got the subcontract to build north from San Jose. And he hired essentially all Chinese workers, about 600 strong, and maybe up to 900, depending on the literature that you look at. The Chinese will pay about $30 a month. That's $1 a day. And they had to pay for their own board out of that. Whereas the white workers would pay more than 30 and had board included. So the Chinese was disadvantaged on 2 counts. They graded past Milpitas, and so here's San Jose, which was even a smaller town than San Francisco. Here's Milpitas, which was just a stop on the row there in the wagon row, and they went up through Mission San Jose, and then they had to go into to the canyon because up to here was maybe about 17 or 18 miles, and they needed 20 miles to get federal aid, so they had to go into the canyon. And so they entered on June 65. And when they entered, the first and hardest task they had to do was to precisely hand carve cuts and fills to create a smooth roadbed through the narrow and twisty canyon with 3 exacting requirements. The first one being the width had to be wide enough and had to be level this way. Secondly, the slope. The slope had to be has to be less than 1% or 1 foot rise in every 100 foot that it travels horizontally. And thirdly, in curvature, no more than 10-degree turn in 100 foot. And the taskmaster, you might say, was the transit here. But really more important is the foreman and the teamwork that the gang will have underneath the foreman's direction. So with that, the Cox crew gang and Corps gangs are usually about 20 or 30 people, but they had about 500. So the Corps enter in June of 65. They hand carved the roadbed and they built 3 bridges. The first one is here. And then the second one is here. That one is still in use now. It's called the Dresser Bridge. And then the third one is up here, and that is Farwell. So they continue on until they got to the 20-mile mark, and they got there on September 1866. So what I'm going to do now is to show you some images of the bridges, the 2 bridges here, 2 and 3, and the cuts that they had to put in between, and the huge cuts and fills along the horseshoe curves there. So this is the second bridge over this side on the left side. There is a flume that carries water to Vallejo's mill. It's a flour mill. That will play an important role in the second act. So I thought I'd introduce it now. Here's the railroad tracks up here. This is the third bridge, and you can see how long it is. And more importantly, it's on stone piers. Typically, the Central Pacific will build with wooden piers because it was faster and cheaper. But here, since this was San Francisco's main line, Western Pacific did not try to skimp on things, and they use um, a sandstone here, and these sandstone piers still exist now, and is still supporting the bridges here. Now, when we get to the to the cuts. The issue is that nowadays the vegetation will soften this. And these are some of the forgotten photos from Lawrence and Houseworth. This one is just above the second bridge. And then the other one coming in, this one is getting towards the third bridge. And they're both looking up the canyon meaning to the east, you might say, where the canyon is a little higher than on the west side. You can see how dramatic these rock cuts are, and the Chinese would have to do all this by hand with the help of some black powder. Now, these are even more dramatic, and I call them the Herculean handiwork of the Cox Corps because it looks like a giant hand came down to make these huge cuts. And in fact, the cuts are so steep that in the wintertime, they would have landslides from the winter rains, especially on a treacherous slope like this one over here on the big cut. And in fact, in the 20th century, when this track was owned then by Southern Pacific, they came in and eliminated this with some machinery. And so if you ride the Niles Railroad, which is the one that uses these tracks, this roadbed right now, you won't see this big cut. And around the corner from this big cut is the big fill, which is held up by embankments, retained on the bottom by huge walls of solid masonry. And here's a picture of it. You can see that these are what is known as dry laid buttress stone retaining wall. And they were locally quarried somewhere near Farwell, and it's still in use, although covered with dirt, partly from the ones that were bulldozed out, and with vegetation. It was slightly damaged by one of the floods, but not badly. So when the track reached the 20-mile mark from San Jose, and therefore eligible for federal aid, Cox halted all construction, abandoning all supplies, equipment, and most disturbingly, his workers. Western Pacific ran out of money after 20 miles. Massive failure in canyon. Chinese builders abandoned. Well, no such headline appeared. There was little interest in Chinese builders. Couldn't care less, you might say. Even instead, without fanfare, the Chinese filed suit against their boss, Jerome Cox et al. And even this was kind of iffy because the Chinese then were not able to testify in court. Nevertheless, surprisingly, in the following year, December of 67, a verdict appeared in the newspaper. And I'll read it to you. In the case of Ying et al. Versus J.B. Cox et al., to recover for the labor furnished to the Western Pacific Railroad Company, the jury in the 11th District Court returned a verdict against defendant Cox and Arnold for $64,434.71. This was a huge class action lawsuit for back pay, about 1,800 man months. In today's dollar, it will be about $2.5 million or maybe $3 million. But did the Chinese builder ever collect? Because Cox wasn't paid either. And he also filed suit. And the newspaper was all over that. And they completely neglected talking about the suit that the Chinese workers made and actually had been awarded. And so with that, we'll take an interlude and discuss the repercussions of this massive failure in the canyon. Now, these guys certainly got paid. They're the directors. And in June of the next following year, in 67, Central Pacific acquired Western Pacific with no money transfer. And in addition to having no money transferred, they got all its assets, which were locomotives and supplies and so forth, and they diverted it all to the Sierras. And so Western Pacific dropped from being San Francisco's main line to Central Pacific's sideline. And they continue in that sort of funky state for the rest of this interlude. During the winter of 67, Central Pacific's Army of Canton was trying to break through the granite in Donner Pass. And so finally, when they did pierce it, Central Pacific finally resumed the Western Pacific line, but from Sacramento end. And so John Ryan, from the contractor that Central Pacific hired, supervised the workers. So the Ryan Corps of Chinese Builders was formed at that time. But they were definitely on the sideline. And many times they would recall people from the Ryan Corps to bring them up into the Sierra, to Nevada, to help them press forward to Utah. Meanwhile, in April of 68, Central Pacific, under the leadership of Leland Stanford, acquired the Oakland waterfront and make Oakland the western terminus of the Pacific Railroad. So San Francisco then fell from being the rail terminus to being across the bay from one, and one in the East Bay. So a year later, Western Pacific began to see the light. And the light came once the ceremony and promontory summit and the trunk line from Omaha to Sacramento was done. And once that was done, Stanford, 2 weeks later, hired Strobridge, James Strobridge, who was his construction ace all the way to Utah, and asked him to build a new main line from the Alameda Canyon to the San Francisco Bay. And he brought his own men, and that's the Strobridge Corps of Chinese Builders. So 2 new corps being formed in the interlude, and we're now ready for Act 2. There's Act 2 in 1869's Western Pacific, now as Central Pacific's main line. And almost immediately, the canyon leaped into action with two new cores working back to back. Strobridge core working to the west and the Ryan core working to the east. Now, this is how it looks on the map that we've seen before. Strobridge brought his men from Sacramento down to the canyon, and then Ryan shifted some of his men into Livermore Pass to the canyon. First, what Strobridge Corps did, they built this new junction, which is called the San Jose Junction, and they followed the flume to Vallejo's Mill because that gave them a water level line that is a fairly level line. And then from there, they can go right into the valley because this is the mouth to Alameda Valley. Meanwhile, the Ryan Corps went over here where Cox stopped. And then they took up the mantle and built eastward. So what you have is you have the old part of the old Cox line forming sort of like a first link in which the Ryan would pull to the right and the Strobridge would pull to the left. And meanwhile, this old line that goes down this way went to San Jose. So that's the reason why this is called the San Jose Junction. Now we have two photos for Act 2 that was just recently found. And I wanted to just show you where they were taken from. The first one is of the first bridge. This is the first bridge here, and you see Dresser is over here, second bridge, and it's taken from the hill above. This is this now has been demoted to the San Jose branch. And the second photograph is the view of the San Jose Junction itself taken from the bridge. And we'll look at that right here. So this is the San Jose Junction in action from September 69 to April 70. So it's a rare photo because it was only 8 months that this junction was functioning. And we're looking east from the top of the 66 First Bridge, the one that the Cox Corps built. The reason why we know it's the top of the bridge is because we can see the top of the train. And so there's nothing over here that's higher than that except the top of the bridge. And besides, over here is the abutment for the bridge. Therefore, you clearly have the bridge. And then this track here is clearly the San Jose branch by the Cox Corps. And the main line, you can't see it, but you can see the cuts that were made on the north side hill, and that's where the main line goes. Now, to get a better picture of it, I'll blow it up a little bit more, and now you can see all kinds of details. First, you see this is a morning westbound train heading for San Jose. There's a temporary building here. There's a wood-burning locomotive that's given by this funnel here. The baggage car, clerestory windows on the passenger train, which is pretty fancy. A freight car on the spur. You can see wood logs here stacked up, and that's for the locomotive. And then, of course, the main line being back here and the junction probably over here in this much larger cut. Going down here, this is a culvert for the flume. So this is the flume that would go and provide water to Vallejos Mill, which is to the left. So now we look at the other picture, and this is the picture of the first bridge and it was found by Janet Barton, taken from the north side hill looking south. This first bridge was known as the Howe Truss Bridge and was quoted to be light, strong, and elegant as a work of art. And here you see the flume, white, going to Vallejos Mills to the left, to the right this time. And then below this, you see a track, and that's the track that the Strobridge Corps built in '69. So this is the later one, and the one that's part of Niles Canyon Railway. This is the water tank, and this part is very close to Marianda. If you ride the railroad, you can see the sign outside. This is Marianda, and that Marianda is to the left. This is where I think the San Jose Junction picture was taken. That's where the camera was, since back in those days, pictures had to be taken with a fairly long exposure, and the camera must be resting on some fixed site. So the summary is that the first iron road through Alameda Canyon was hand-built by 3 corps of Chinese builders in 2 acts. The first corps was obviously the Cox Corps. And they came in spring of '65. They did the heaviest cuts, the fills, the stone retaining walls, and 3 big substantial bridges on stone piers. And they had to stop on the San Jose 20-mile mark in September '66. And did they ever get fully paid? We don't know. Then the other 2 corps came later in '69. The Strobridge Corps built the San Jose Junction and the main line westward, past Vallejos Mills, which became Niles, and then out of the canyon by June of '69, and then continue on to San Francisco Bay. The Ryan Corps then worked the other side, starting in '69, June '69, and they picked up where Cox left off at the San Jose 20-mile mark. They laid track eastward to Pleasanton, and they came out of the canyon by mid-August in 1869. And they continued track laying all the way down to the San Joaquin River. So the line from Sacramento to San Francisco Bay, which opened in September 6th of 1869, completed the final leg of President Lincoln's Pacific Railroad from the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean. And that united the nation and propelled the USA from ocean to ocean into the modern age. And before we go to the next slide, just recall these dates. That the canyon, out of the canyon by July, out of the canyon by mid-August. So certainly by mid-August, the canyon was done. The railroad in the canyon was done. And then the whole final leg was completed in September '69. So what about the Niles marker? The Niles marker is in the parking lot near Niles Boulevard and J Street in Niles District, Fremont, California. And here's a picture of it. And I'll transcribe the part that's relevant for our discussion. And it says, quote, in September, and the year is 1869. The final link between San Francisco and Sacramento was completed near the flour mill of Jesus Vallejo. That is Vallejo's mill, a short distance east from this location, end quote. So this is the marker. The Jeopardy clue was correct in what it said, but the Jeopardy staff chose the wrong marker because the marker itself is incorrect. So that's the twist. So let me say that once again to make sure you understand what I'm saying, is that what the Jeopardy clue said about the marker is perfectly correct because it was about the marker. But unfortunately, the marker itself is incorrect. And it wasn't the final link. At best, it was, as we said, more like the first link that the Cops Corps went in there and built. So let me give you two takeaways from this talk. The final leg of the Pacific Railroad was completed through the combined efforts of three different Chinese corps in two separate acts. And these three Chinese corps, despite failure and manipulation of the railroad companies, heroically hand-built the final leg to the Pacific and deserves to be widely recognized and honored. So I hope that you can use the chat box to ask your questions. If the chat isn't working, then I'm sure that Denise will find some other means to have you answer questions. So now I'll turn it over to Denise for question and answer.
We are all good because
Okay, good.
I got the group chat to work. Okay, yeah. But first of all, thank you. This was a very engaging presentation. Now here is some of the Q&A questions. So there was one, it said, the bridge from 1865, is it still in use?
The bridge from 1866, I would say, the ones that were, two of them are still in use. That's the Dresser Bridge and the Farwell Bridge. In fact, I was on there just of last year, I guess. I didn't get on it this year. So it's very much in use. The first bridge was abandoned in August of 1870, and then later was decommissioned, I should say, in August of 1870. And that was April of 1870, sorry. It was decommissioned in April of 1870. And the first bridge then was abandoned after that. And how it was destroyed, we don't know. Some thought it was by fires, others thought it was by floods. I've looked into it and I haven't been able to find anything in the literature about that. Okay.
But the fun part is some of those bridges that still exist, you could, when you ride the Niles Canyon, you could go over them.
That's right. And in
There you
the
go.
old days, you can go underneath them. And now it's a little bit iffy because that's sort of out of bounds. But that's one of my dreams is that one of these days we might be able to um, get in get into the bottom of those bridges and see the sandstone pier. I see a follow-up chat that said, why was it decommissioned? It was decommissioned. Well, that's a story about how Niles was formed. And that's another lecture that I've given, The Birth of Niles. Niles was born on April 28th, 1870. And on that day, they decommissioned the San Jose Junction and opened up the Niles Junction. So that was when the Niles Junction came to life and Niles was born. And so when they decommissioned the San Jose Junction, the first bridge was the thing that fed into the San Jose Junction. And so that was also decommissioned as well. That was part of the approach.
Got it. Okay, next question. What was the main dialect spoken among the workers?
That's a very good question. The soundscape of railroad workers. I haven't seen anyone really talk about that. And it's really Hoisanwa. It's really the one that comes from the main group of immigrants, mainly from Hoisan or Toisan in Cantonese. Um, it is the best book to get a flavor of that, I think, is the book by William Hoy. I think that's the right author. The name of it is Eight Promises to My Toisan um, Mother. I think that's the uh, title of that book. And that will tell you a little bit more about the soundscape of Toisanese or Hoisanese or Hoisanwa. Those are all sort of the different ways that people like to call that.
Cool. All right. This one they said they were asking, has there been any personal or pay records uncovered?
Any personal or paying records?
Yeah, like a payroll report of anything?
There might be payroll reports, but it's not personal. I mean, for one thing, Central Pacific did a very poor job of keeping track of their Chinese builders. Well, they won't call them builders. I call them builders because William Spear called them builders of iron roads, and so I've adopted that nomenclature. I think it gives them a little bit more stature than what Central Pacific gave them. Central Pacific never took roles. When a Chinese worker died, they did not keep track of that. The payrolls also uh, had had the common names. In Cantonese, as you know, you you call someone by their first name and you put an ah in front of it. And so Ah Ying, that's not his surname. That's just his first name. Um, so so the payrolls will have a lot of something, and we don't know who they are because it's sort of saying, Victor. There's a lot of Victors, and you don't know which one. And even if you give the last name, there are a lot of Victor Wongs around. The other thing that I would say about the payroll is that the payroll was really disseminated through um, the head of the gang. So each gang had a cook and had a head foreman, and typically the foreman would take the money and pay the cook, and which then provided for the room and board, and then the rest then went to the various builders, workers. So I don't think we're going to get much from the payroll. I know that Stanford spent an enormous amount of effort in running up to the 150th anniversary of Promontory. Um, and they did not uncover any first person personal uh, artifacts. What we do have, we have descendants from the railroad workers who provide very valuable information about what their ancestors did. Okay.
All right, the next question was asking, was there a ceremony when the Niles Canyon was finally completed through?
When the Niles Canyon part was completed, there was obviously no ceremony because they were pressing forward to finish the whole final leg. I'm now working on finishing up another paper on where that last link was. And there was no ceremony on that as well, because it turns out that that was done uh, in real time. That is to say, the train was coming across the plains, and the workers had to get the last rail onto the bridge and nailed the final spike in and step back and let the train go by. And so it was a real last spike. And that was what's so fantastic about it. But that story is not told. And I hope to be able to get enough to tell it um, the next time.
There you go. All right, another question. Did the Chinese workers build the tracks of the Western Pacific Railroad, the ones that are near the Central Park in Fremont? They're
Okay.
gone now.
Well, there are two, now that I think about it. Um, let's not go to Central Park quite yet. Let's go down, if you're familiar with Fremont, let's go down to where Irvington is. And, there's a street that goes over called Washington Boulevard that goes over the tracks there that Bart runs through. And Bart wants to put an Irvington station there. When I heard about that, I did some research on that. The paper has been written, but never really put out for anyone to look at. Uh, and I studied that, and it turns out that there were several tracks at that point, which had to be removed because the overpass uh, was getting in the way. They wanted the overpass to come to grade so that they would have an intersection with Roberts Street and Washington. They wanted that to be an on-grade intersection. So then they had to remove one track and push it over. That track that was removed is the original track, and the original. And I can show that because I found a Sanborn insurance map of the depot that was there, and therefore lined that up. And indeed, there was a depot. It was called Washington's Corner Depot for the Central Pacific, and so that part the Chinese built. The the newer Western Pacific, which is the 20th century Western Pacific, I don't know the composition of the builders. I imagine by that time, with the Exclusion Act and with the heightened anti-Chinese sentiment in the United States, that it was not built by Chinese. And the one in that goes by Central Park, I think, is the 20th century Western Pacific. I may be wrong about that. I have to look at the map on that because I didn't research that part, but I did do some serious research with Tau Alpha on on the Irvington Depot site.
Okay, another question asks, where did the workers go after the line was completed? Did any work on the railroad in Sonoma County?
Yes, in fact, the phrase "the white tents of Chinese builders" comes from a report from Santa Rosa. So the the Strobridge Corps really did not finish. They only finished up to Alameda. Um, Strobridge left in October and went up north to build from Marysville to Chico. And so many of the Chinese builders followed him, those that that came down with him, I would guess that the ones that he favored would probably go with him uh, and build from Marysville up north to Chico, and from there up further north to join with the ones in Oregon. So they were trying to, Central Pacific was trying to monopolize the West Coast, and they wanted to get that quickly. So in fact, back in April of 1869, before Promontory Summit, Central Pacific issued a dispatch, and they sort of announced their intention so that people will know. The first thing they said was that they're going to finish it to San Francisco Bay, and so they were going to make Western Pacific their main line. The second thing was that they're going to compete against the Cal Pacific line, which is the one that went from Vallejo to Sacramento, the one that's close to I-80 now. Um, that was their competition. From Vallejo, they would have to take a ferry to San Francisco, but a long, slow ferry. And then thirdly, that they were going to go and connect up with Oregon. And so those are the three priorities as of April of 69. So yes, the workers had a lot to do after things were done because there were a lot more railroads to be built. And in fact, they even went south to Texas and so forth to build railroads down there. Okay.
All righty. Going back on that Niles marker, it was asked what was wrong with the marker exactly?
What was wrong with the marker is that the final link was done close to Vallejo's mill, just east of this location, is that. Well, depends what you mean by close. Is 50 miles close? Well, I don't think so. I think that what they meant is that they were thinking that where the San Jose 20-mile mark is, you can remember that in the map. They thought that that was where the final spike was laid, but no, that's not where it was. The Ryan Corps went there and built away from that rather than building to it. So it was the wrong direction. The Ryan Corps went east, excuse me, at that point. They didn't come and hit it from the east. They went to the east. So that's what's wrong with it.
All righty. Then this person was asking, is it possible for the general public to view what is left of the Chinese construction in the canyon?
To view what is left in the Chinese, the roadbed is what they really left because when Southern Pacific gave up that line, they took the rails, and in fact they took some of the ties as well, but they left most of the ties. I take that back. Maybe they left all the ties, but they took the rails, and so new rails had to be laid. So what the Chinese left for us is the roadbed and all the cuts that they made and all the fills that they made. And these are enormous cuts and enormous fills. We don't appreciate it as much because vegetation has softened it. That's why I think those pictures that Houseworth has preserved for us is very important. And I intend to try to mount an exhibit of those in the library if the library wants it. And I think that that would show sort of firsthand photographic evidence of the ruggedness of the canyon 160 years ago, approximately. So The other possibility, which I don't think is open yet, is to get under the bridge. And then got some pictures of it. Um, if anyone's interested, I guess I could share screen and show you a picture, but should I do that?
Yeah, I love the pictures that you've been sharing. I think they're interesting because it's right in our own backyard.
Okay, let's see if I could I'll get back in there and find it. Okay, I'm gonna have to back it up a little bit. Let's see, what can I do? Maybe I can go forward. Uh,
While Victor's doing that, what I shared in the chat is the website for the Washington Township. You'll see when you go through the website, you kind of drill down, you'll see where it's going to be talking about this presentation that we did, but also you can look further when you go into it. Then you could find Victor's articles with the Chinese History Project. But I'll be sharing that at the end after this.
okay, so this is the picture I wanted to show you. This is the dresser bridge. So this is 1866 sandstone that you see right here. This is under the dresser bridge, and this is the creek. So this was a picture by Alan Frank in 1993. I cropped it. Um, uh, Alan Frank just passed away this year, unfortunately. Um, so it'll be really tremendous to be able to see something like this. So that was part of my dream, you might say. The other thing I might mention is that if I go back to go back here, I can explain a little bit more for some of the questions that were asked. This is the Niles Canyon Railway. So this is how it looks like now. This is Marienda, and this is the San Jose Junction. This is Mayborg, and this is the 20 mile mark from San Jose. So the Ryan Corps built from this eastward. This is where I think the Niles marker thought that the final spike was the final link was laid. Uh, the Strobridge Corps then went over here and out into the valley. This is the first bridge here. The decommission of the first bridge came when this, so this is my San Jose Birth of Niles talk. When this was switched, when they no longer changed trains here for San Jose, but changed trains over here at Niles. So then this junction opened up. Unfortunately, this is also called Niles Junction, so you have to be careful what you mean by Niles Junction. I mean this one, this Niles Junction. This one I put in as 1909 because it was built when Western Pacific, this is now back to another question that was asked about the 20th century Western Pacific. When they came through, they put that little bit in there. So this is 1909, so very recent stuff. This is 1869. This is 1866. And this little short bit here was added in 1869 and was opened in 1870. So in April 28th, 1870, this opened up, this closed up, and then this was decommissioned. So I hope that explains that adequately. You can see all the different railroads that use this in times past. The this the 1909 Western Pacific, actually when it came up here, uh, deviated from these, and there's a tunnel that comes across here, which I don't see on this, and I'm not exactly sure where it goes, but because there was no room for another track here, so they have a separate track that goes through this way.
Which one was the first bridge that was decommissioned?
The first bridge that was decommissioned is right here.
And why was it decommissioned? Sorry.
It was decommissioned, okay, because San Jose Junction was decommissioned when
Okay.
the Niles Junction was commissioned. So when they made the switch from here to here as the place where they would change the trains from San Jose to Oakland, which way it would go, they shut this down because this was a port junction. It's right in the canyon. There's no way to turn a locomotive around. They can't put a roundhouse, anything in there. So they put the roundhouse and locomotive turnarounds here in the valley. And so it was decommissioned when they shut this down and moved it over here. So Central Pacific, when they built this, they already knew that this was temporary. And that's why that San Jose Junction picture that I found is a rare picture because only 8 months this thing existed as a junction that trains would use. So any follow-up on that, Denise?
No, I'm going to move on to the next question. Did the
Okay.
Chinese laborers work alongside with white workers, and where did they eat and sleep after work?
Sleeping quarters was definitely segregated. The Chinese were in tents. The white tents of Chinese builders was the phrase. Um, that's a local thing. I'm not sure whether they were certainly not in tents in the Sierras and things like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about locally. When when they started Western Pacific in Sacramento, there's an article about the tents that they were making for the Chinese to stay in. So the Chinese were in gangs, as I mentioned before, with a cook because the diets were different. The Chinese would drink water that was boiled and then cooled, and that was their practice, which prevented a lot of illness on their part. So they certainly did not live uh, together. Now, were they on the same work gang? Uh, I don't know enough to say that. I know that certainly when they were doing the Livermore Tunnel, that they had white uh, people working on the tunnels as well as Chinese. Um, and certainly when they were working in the Summit Tunnel in Donner Pass, the Cornish white tunnelers came and they sort of competed against the Chinese and the Chinese won. So yes, I guess I would say they worked together, whether in the same gang or not, I'm not sure.
And with that question, someone else was asking, do you happen to know what did they eat and who did they communicate with in China?
They ate a very well-rounded diet, I would say. They mainly, but mainly dried um, foods. That is, the protein came from dry shrimp or dried cuttlefish, dry fish, dry pork, maybe. I'm not sure about that latter part. The lists I have that came from a car that was promised to them when they agreed to go to Texas to build a railroad there. And then there was a nice article that gave a full list of what that um, storehouse that will follow the railroad workers, sort of like a train car, you might say, had in there. And the striking part to me, sorry for the tangent, the striking part for me was that there was a lot of pens and writing paper. So it shows me that the the railroad corps was quite literate, as well as a lot of things connected with the New Year. So they celebrated New Year on the train tracks, I guess. But that list I can certainly get. I don't know it from memory. Uh,
Gotcha. So further interest on Chinese cooking is they're asking, do you have any information about Chinese cooking and the kitchens and the railroad labor camps in the 1860s?
well, someone else probably knows that much better than I. I think I just about gave you all the information I sort of know about. Um, as I said, I've really looked into just the local aspect of this railroad building and not the more broader scale.
Well, I could let anybody know if you're interested in trying to see what an old Chinese cooking setup came up with the stand-up woks, you can go over to the Chiku store over in Fiddletown and the town of Locke, and you could actually see examples of that. Another question said, did the locations of the boarding houses move as the tracks were done?
Yes, that's why they lived in tents. And so the reason that they gave for um, using tents for the Chinese is that they were expecting that for the Western Pacific tracks that would go quickly. So therefore, it wasn't like the case in which they spent a year and a half building the summit tunnel in the Sierras. The Livermore tunnel took just about as long as that, but I guess maybe the Livermore housing was a little different. But the literature still seems to say that the Chinese didn't live in wooden things because it did say the white workers lived in wooden things and Chinese in tents. So I do remember that in the articles about the Livermore tunnel situation. Um, the so with the tents, then they can certainly pick up and move. One thing I would like to find is more archaeological evidence for some sort of China camp in Niles Canyon, because since they spent some time in there, 16 months, um, I'm sure with 500 people or so in a narrow canyon, there's only a few spots that are big enough to be part of the China camp, and most of them are sort of across the creek. That's the information I've been given, more or less. Where that big cut was across the creek from there might have been the China camp.
Okay, this other question says is, do you know if it's possible to walk up some of the old right of way to see some of these historic sites? I think that it might be an appropriate way to honor these amazing workers. Um, I walked along the now abandoned WP right of way near their house in Lake Elizabeth. So is it possible? Do you know?
Well, it's possible. What is recommended on that, I guess, is another question. And I think
Just proceed with caution.
yes, because you have to go over no trespassers sign and things like that. Um, so
I
you
had stuff like
that's
that too. Yeah, I gotta go, well, I'm not gonna trespass over there. Okay. So the next question is asked, did the Civil War impact the construction of the railroad?
yes, very definitely. Was hard to find iron during the war. That's why I think Central Pacific really didn't get started on theirs until 65. So Western Pacific got their start earlier. I mean, January 65, they were in full bore, you might say, already, and Central Pacific was just barely starting with a gang of 50, you might say, of Chinese workers in early 65. Um, so I would like to see much more.
All
I,
right.
I just saw that the chat that says bring a dog along for
Yes, I do.
okay. Back to well, I forgot what I was talking about now. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'll go to the next question.
Okay.
Some went to Nevada County to build the narrow gauge railroad. They were honored with a California Senate resolution. Oh, that might have been, nope, sorry, that wasn't a question. Let's see. Trying to see if I got them. I got the show the pictures. I did the link. Niles Canyon Railway has signs showing the Chinese railway workers. No, they got that. There was oh, will you mention Mossdale for the person who wanted to know the link, the last link?
Yes, the last link was on the bridge near Mossdale. Is the first bridge to span the San Joaquin River. And the first bridge to span the San Joaquin River was the last link of the final leg to the Pacific.
All right. We have two more questions. They were still a little bit confused. Do you think the last spike was laid near the Vallejo Mill or deep in the canyon elsewhere?
No, it was not laid in the canyon anywhere. I can say that because by mid-August of 1869, excuse me, by mid-August of 1869, they were out of the canyon. The canyon railroad was done, was finished. It doesn't mean that it was completed in the sense that, or inaugurated in the sense that regular trains would run through it. What it meant is that they finished laying the tracks, um, and they were moving elsewhere with track laying. So track laying is the last part of completing the railroad. And so when the last track was laid, the last rail was laid, that's usually considered to be when a railroad was completed. And
Yeah.
so the answer to the Niles Canyon question is no, the last spike or the last rail was not in Niles Canyon. Uh, and it was 50 miles away from that. It is not something that has been celebrated. There is a plaque out there which has been stolen. And so therefore, there's no plaque for you to look at. I have
Oh,
pictures of it, but it was stolen in 2007 or 8, something like that. It's been replaced and stolen twice, I think, according to the records I got from the state. And then the further issue with that is that the date on it is 2 days off the record. That is, was slightly um, was slightly mistaken. And I found where the mistakes were made so that I can now rationalize what was on that marker in Mossdale with the September 6th date that is given on the marker that is in Alameda. So if you go to Alameda, there's a Shell station in Alameda that has a first transcontinental railroad marker that is correct. And it says that September 6th, 1869, the first transcontinental railroad was completed. Now, the reason why the 6th is such a easy date to remember is that that was the first day that the state fair in Sacramento opened in 1869. And Leland Stanford wanted the railroad to be completed in time for the opening of the state fair. So he himself rode on that first through train that went from Sacramento to Alameda and went over the Mossdale Bridge at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the first, and excuse me, when the last spike was given. So I'm giving away my talk now. And
And
so
the last question is how big were the gangs?
how big were the gangs? The work gangs? Oh, well, typical work gangs is about 20, 30, something like that. But so when there's 500, that's broken down into smaller gangs. That's why I decided not to use the word gang for the big one. Although sometimes people do that, and I did it when I first started looking at this. I call it a big gang a gang.
Alrighty, so the last thing, since we're headed towards the end, I wanted to share this with all of you. This is the website that I posted the link, and you can see right over here, Forgotten East Bay Tracks. That's kind of what we were talking about. But see this part that says the Chinese History Project. This is where you could find the recording and further information about what Victor and Janet Barton are doing. I love that picture over there. So this is the Chinese History Project. So all of you know, so if you guys are curious about at a bunkhouse at the Shin Gardens in Fremont, there is a bunkhouse that's there. There'll be more discussions that are taking place. You could look at this, and that's how I found Victor and Janet and learned more about what they were doing. So you can go look on the website to keep track of anything else and to look out for the recording. So I'd like to thank you all for attending CHSA. Thank you so much for your support so we could bring this to all of you. And again, thank you for attending. Go check out their website, and then you could learn more about the Chinese in our backyard over here. Thank you and good night.
Good night.